Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Jello with Angelo. I am here with MMA coach and Kajikembo instructor Will Deutschendorf.
All right, yeah, you got it. Nice.
Yeah, I wrote it phonetically. And as you saw in the title, BJJ and mental health in the thumbnail, and then how does martial arts help your mental health? So I'm Angelo Ferrer. I'm an MMA coach and also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach out here in Japan. And I saw this. Why are we talking about this? I saw a meme, I think it was the other day, that had a famous actor. It's who's that? Jonah. Who's that guy? Jonah Hill? Is it Jonah Hill? Jonah Hill. Yeah.
I don't know.
Jonah Hill. It was Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill was saying about how he's started his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey and how martial arts has really helped him with his mental health, and how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in particular has really helped him lose weight and gain more confidence in what he was doing. And it really helped him get out of some things that he was depressed about, right? And just to kind of give you an idea that I'm not making all this up here, here's a picture here of Jonah Hill, right? Actor Jonah Hill started movies, white belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now. And there's a picture of him here with a gi on. And he's continued to train. He loves, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube about how he fell in love with BJJ. And there's a conversation being had in the martial arts community about how martial arts can help you with your mental health. And so I figured we'd continue this discussion here. If you clicked on this, how does martial arts help you with your mental health? And I'm just going to grab this question and just hand it over to my guest. How does martial arts, or has martial arts helped you with your mental health or your students' mental health?
Well, I mean, for me especially, I don't know what I would do without martial arts training for my mental health. I mean, I've been, going back all the way to probably middle school, early like middle school, late elementary school. Like I struggled with my own like depression and anxiety issues, and I didn't get into martial arts until I was 8 years old. So when I did finally, like that was where I really started to come out of my shell and like deal with a lot more of my anxiety and dealing with like any of those negative emotions. But these days, like especially for me, losing my identical twin Hank at about 29, like that was definitely something that was really challenging, and that was something that martial arts training wise, like I don't know what I would have done without my training. Like, and I mean like I would be in such a negative place, and then my coach would basically like do hard sparring with me, and I was training for an amateur fight and beat the crap out of me, and just like the endorphins and like the feeling of like, you know what, like I do want to stop this from happening. Like I am depressed, but this pain is worse, than the emotional pain getting pounded over and over again. Like, and that having to fight through that, like that really helped me kind of discover like that like will to live, or that like finding like a deeper meaning, and then you just feel so much better, like all those neurotransmitters that like kind of kick off afterwards, like so that was a big thing for me, was getting into like doing kickboxing in a more intense way. But even before then, like just doing like regular point sparring and training in a community and like making friends and people that I was working out with that like I never would have associated outside of it because I was such an anxious kid. So like, and then realizing that I was pretty good at it, like that really helped a lot too, because if I didn't have that component, that would have been like having the ability to have an instructor like actually like showed me I had aptitude, and I was able to like kind of do well, and like he made me feel like I actually could become an instructor and all that. Like that all played a huge role in like building up my self-esteem and my self-concept, so that like I could kind of get out of that whole just anxious, depressed state. Because before that, I really wasn't good at anything that I can remember significantly. Like I really had, I mean, I was an okay athlete, but like I was a very small kid. And so I definitely wasn't going to be doing anything major, like, becoming a basketball player when I was like 5'6", 5'7". Like as soon as I hit middle school and I stopped growing, I was like, oh, I guess there goes any dreams for basketball. That's it. But yeah, I mean, overall, the martial arts training played a huge like role in me kind of creating my own like identity that and this making me feel like I could accomplish things in life and like actually see things through. You know, I mean, how was it for you, Angelo? Because I know you've done a lot of martial arts training over the years. Like, how has that affected your mental health?
You know, so, and I think this is an interesting conversation because one thing that I said in the thumbnail, it says BJJ and mental health in the thumbnail. And one of the things I think about is the differences between different styles of martial arts. Because I'm not just yeah, I'm a BJJ coach, but also I'm an MMA coach. And as you just mentioned, I have a mixed martial arts background. So I've done boxing, I've done kickboxing. And I think what's unique to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, since they're, depending on the school, put that little caveat in there, caveat. For the most part, you're grappling. There isn't a lot of striking involved. And a lot of it's going to be really close contact with someone else. So there's this endorphin kick that kicks in, and you can be like aggressively violent with less repercussions than you would in kickboxing.
Really? Are you sure about that?
So like,
I agree with you.
So like if I decide to come in, so like if I decide to be aggressively violent in kickboxing, right? If I'm walking to my first class of my first kickboxing class, and I decide to go all out on my sparring partner who probably knows way more kickboxing than I do, it's gonna end really badly for me.
It's gonna be the last class you probably go to.
Yeah. Well, in jiu-jitsu, we all make fun of the spastic white belt, the spazzy white belt, because for the most part, you're given the tools to control a spazzy person, and they can spaz out all they want. And,
it's great practice. You know, like when you get to the point where you have the giant spaz 200-pound guy come in and you can deal with them and feel like I survived today, like I was able to deal with that no problem, like. That's like a huge milestone in jiu-jitsu, right? Like that's like what you want is to like practice on that guy and not be afraid of him when he shows up. That's a good thing.
Yeah. So like, the reason that this ties into mental health is because, well, you really get to let out a lot of pent up, not just aggression, but a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I guess aggression. You can let out a lot of aggression. You can let out a lot of power and feel like you did a lot. And if you in the right environment, under the right controlled environment, no one should get injured. Don't get me started on that path. But that interaction, that close contact, and psychologically speaking, they talked about how the close contact lets out a lot of oxytocin, skin to skin contact with someone else. Lets out oxytocin. So you like, that's where that bonding comes from. That's where that bonding comes from. That
explains why I will go with someone and know them for 30 minutes rolling, and then they're telling me that they are no longer addicted to, you know, heroin, and it's been 6 months, and I'm over here like, wow, that's really great, man. But in my head, I'm like, dude, I didn't know we were that close.
Yeah, which you were.
That's great though, right? I'm glad. I'm glad he doesn't feel any shame right now, and he can share that with me because that's huge. But in my head, I'm like, dude, like that's really like personal stuff.
That's real personal stuff. But that's very common in jiu-jitsu. That's very common in jiu-jitsu, and not so common. Not to say that there's not to take away from the striking arts, but that there is something unique there in BJJ where I think because of being such close proximity to someone else, getting over that. Because it's weird. There's another thing I'm going to say. For someone who's never done, if you're watching this podcast, I know a lot of BJJ guys are like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you get over the fact that you're really close to another guy and sometimes another girl. You kind of get these things out of your head and you focus on this task that you're doing, and you kind of feel like you did this together, and you come out of it after, like you said, 30 minutes, and you're like two different people, like someone you never knew. Now you feel like you've known them because you got over. It's a really big social taboo. I can't think of another place that I'm going to go up to someone in a social setting and literally be my nose to their nose and not feel super uncomfortable. So like
that's true. There is no other, and that's good for people like me too, because having social anxiety, it's like we don't have to talk. We can just do this, and then we basically get closer than I would with anyone other than my wife. You know.
Yeah.
And that's pretty unique, you know, because my love language is physical touch. So like if a girl walks up who like has known me for a long time and I don't really feel like I like them that much, like I like do that ass outside hug, like I don't feel comfortable. But then it's like I'll have no problem like trying to do a triangle choke to somebody, regardless of gender.
Yeah,
It's just weird how that works with the closeness, where you
yeah,
really do feel like it's okay, and it's like I didn't even know the oxytocin thing. That's
yeah.
cool.
There's the oxytocin thing, and then so and for those of you that don't know what oxytocin is, I should have said that. Oxytocin is the chemical that's released between usually in research psychology, it's released between a baby and its parents, usually the mother, because the mother's holding the baby a lot, and that skin to skin contact creates a bond between the baby and the mother. So you look at jiu-jitsu, you're creating bonds with people very quickly because of the skin to skin contact. And yeah, you have a gi on, but you're having a lot of contact with someone for 30 minutes, which really helps you create this bond with them. So yeah, there's a lot of research being done on how that helps your mental health. Because as you know, as you just said, we do live in a world where we don't experience a lot of contact with someone, and it's again in a healthy way, right? It's in a healthy way.
Right.
It's in a platonic way, which helps you enjoy and the benefits from it in a healthy environment. And this is the one thing. And now we'll break away from BJJ, and I'll argue that you can still get that from the striking arts too. Like you can still get that. That still happens. You still have
I,
contact with other people. It just
as
doesn't
long as
happen.
you have,
It just doesn't
I
happen. It doesn't happen in 30 minutes. In BJJ, it happens right away because you're doing it. That's how you're doing things. But if you go to any program, any martial arts program, there's a sense of community, a sense of people that you're working together with. And you might not get that in your first class, depending on how the programs ran, but you will get that sense of belonging, and you'll get that sense of friendship and camaraderie, because that's really what it is. And then
yeah.
maybe not on the first day you're going to tell someone that you kicked heroin and and that you're sober now, but
You're only there because your wife divorced you,
yeah, you're not
like
going to get right. But you'd be surprised how after a few months of training with someone, they'll start talking like that, right? After a few months of training somebody, that stuff will start coming up. They will start opening up and talking about their personal life and things that you normally wouldn't disclose to someone, out in the public. I can't, this you end up being part of that network. So that your question of how has it helped me in my mental health is it's giving me a community that I can be a part of. I never really feel alone, and that's one of the biggest things with mental health. Is one of the biggest issues you have in mental health is when you start feeling alone. Is when all the dark thoughts start coming over. You feel alone in the world. You feel socially isolated. Well, the cool thing about martial arts, BJJ, kickboxing, karate, it doesn't really matter what style we're talking about. If you're a martial artist, you have a home anywhere in the world. And
yeah.
that's the one thing that I've always loved about martial arts. And since I do multiple martial arts, I don't have when I came to Japan, there was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school near me. They were all far away. So the closest place to me was an MMA school. So I ended up in an MMA gym. But again, because I do mixed martial arts, it gave me a place. I couldn't speak the language. I was socially isolated. It was just me and my wife. I'm in Japan. And even though I couldn't speak the language, I immediately met a group of people that I could hang out with. And within a few months, I had people to go out to dinner with, and I had a bunch of friends just based on doing martial arts.
Yeah, I mean that's the amazing thing about having that type of like traditional environment, or I mean, I guess traditional for MMA isn't quite the same, but like when I think about martial arts school, I think of like the student teacher relationship. I think about the older brother relationship of the students who came before you. I think about the younger brother or sister, however you want to look at it, of the newer students that come in after you, where it's like somebody shows up to class and you've been there 6 months, like you didn't know anything possibly, and you've been copying everyone in the world, and now all of a sudden, because you're the next lowest ranking guy, the instructor's like, all right, you're gonna work with this guy now, okay? Like, hey, help him out, would you? And it's like, oh, now I help him, like I haven't known anything, but all of a sudden you're in a position of like trust that you may not have even had your entire life, depending on your education and your background. So it's like, oh, and I'm responsible for this person. Like that can have a huge impact on somebody depending on their personality. Like, well, on one hand, it could be a little bit too much power for some people, but I would argue for most people, like it's good to have that kind of thing of like feeling like you need to help somebody out. It's the same thing with my with the nonprofit that I do for survivors of suicide loss. Like you lose someone to suicide, and you come in, and it's like, wow, everything is terrible for like 6 months, and you think that your life has been awful, and then somebody else comes in who just lost someone 3 weeks ago, and one, you realize, wow, I've made so much progress, but then also you're saying things to this person to try to get them to look at things differently that maybe the first day you didn't believe at all, but now it's like time has gone on and you realize, you know what, I do feel this way and it has helped me, and passing it on to somebody else and helping someone else like makes a huge difference for you. I think it's the same thing with martial arts to an extent.
Yeah, and then what happens with, and what I found out, and for those of you that don't know, I should process this first. I have a master's in psychology, not like, I don't know. So this is where I'm coming from. And one thing I can, and I've run counseling, group counseling meetings, and then that kind of thing in my work as an undergrad. One of the biggest hurdles you have in psychology is getting people to just want to walk in. Period. I used to run these mental health workshops for men to talk about issues that they have, and I'd have guys walk in, and they would walk in and they'd see everyone talking in the group, and they would listen and they'd walk right out because they just didn't feel comfortable. Foo, especially for guys.
Yeah, that masculinity
Too
aspect, right?
touchy feely, cycle babble bullshit is what they're thinking. They walk out. While martial arts has that, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has that. It's not like they're getting together to talk about their feelings, but it has that camaraderie. It has that for specifically for men and women. Now we can go outside of gender, but it has that same sharing bonding experience. And since the goal isn't mental health, it's easier for people to be a part of it. Well, there's such a big stigma against going to see a psychologist or go as a guy, for especially for guys. Not, I don't know,
For guys especially.
not
I
as
think
much,
for
not
girls
as
it's
much
gotten
for
better,
girls. Yeah, for girls, I
but
think I don't know.
no.
I know the newer generation's doing a little bit better than my generation was,
You
but
still look like you're just trying to play the victim if you're a guy going to a therapist, right? It's like,
or,
what do
or
you got
you're
to complain about? Like,
or
come
you're
on, man.
or
Like, just
you're
get it together. Like,
yeah, or what you're going, well, yeah, like counseling is not something that people from men from my generation will openly talk about. Some will, but mostly won't. So, not that you're going to get counseling, and you shouldn't, I should say, get counseling in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know some instructors would love to say that you
I,
can, but I'm going to say, please don't
no.
don't do that. Go to a professional. But the cool thing is that the main point of the workshops I ran was just to get guys to talk to each other and to spend time and be authentic with each other. While in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because of the grappling and even in martial arts in general, because of that intense interaction, that ends up happening without words. And for a lot of guys that have a hard time expressing themselves, that's where that comes from. Now, this can happen for women too. This is not a guy to girl thing. This happens for women too. Women can come in and they get confidence, and it builds their character. They get faced in challenges that you will face in regular life. Suddenly, the challenges you can face inside of a martial arts class, and if you start competing in a competition setting, it'll your regular life seems boring and easy in comparison when you get over some of the hurdles that martial arts throws at you. So I think that's where that comes in right there. Like that's like one of the things that kind of comes to mind.
Yeah, I definitely the competing and the sense of accomplishment for sure. Like, I mean, everyone talks about belts, right? And when I was a kid, like, uh, I made my nickname Kempo Black when I was like my like AOL instant messenger name as a thing where it's like I'm gonna get the black belt, so I'm gonna make a Kempo Black is like my commitment to myself, and that seemed like such a big deal, and it was for like a kid who's didn't really think he was going to college, didn't have any parents who went to college. Like getting an accomplishment that was like a long term 3 or 4 year goal was kind of like the epitome of getting like like feeling like I made it, like I can do anything I want. And I really have carried that energy with me to everything. Like my dad always told me since I was a kid, like, hey, you can be anything you want to be, you can do anything you want to do. But that was like the first time I believed it was after I got my black belt. Now, there's nothing mystical about the black belt. To be honest, the mentality I developed in martial arts with all of my other mental health problems and everything else, like I don't know what point I decided no matter what, I'm always going to go for it 100%, whatever I decide I'm going to do. But it definitely was martial arts that gave that to me. And, having that sort of mindset, I think really matters. I mean, even I was interviewing somebody yesterday for 3 hours. I, ironically, am going for my master's in psychology. Imagine that. So I guess I can hit you up for help now, Angelo. I forgot about that. But, he was talking about how he had suicidal ideation every day. He's had it every day of his life. And he's basically got something tattooed on his arm in Latin, and I wish I could remember what it is, but it means like, don't make one wrong step, which is basically like, don't follow that one mistake that you're going to make that leads to another mistake that leads to another, that basically ends up with you dying tragically, essentially. I think that mindset's really important. Like, you have to have that mindset of like, I'm going to go for it no matter what. No matter what, I'm going to keep on moving forward. And martial arts can give that to you, especially if you're struggling with mental health. Like jiu-jitsu can give it to you, striking can give it to you, as long as you find a community and a teacher, whatever the art is. I mean, I'm sure there are arts that can't give it to you. I don't know if we should list them here. Uh, but you know what I mean? Like, I think if you have a sense of community and you feel like you're accomplishing something that is real, for sure, like you can pretty much go to any location that makes you feel like you're learning something authentically and get that experience.
And then another thing about martial arts is that it's accessible, right? Counseling, not as accessible.
Not for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Like
6 weeks out. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So like it's accessible, and I think that's what you can have access to something. That's what I'm trying to get at when we're talking about again BJJ and mental health, and the greater title of how does martial arts help your mental health, is that I can I have a lot of access to a lot of martial arts in my community. No matter where you are, like martial arts is pretty accessible. Counseling, a lot more expensive and not as easy, not as easy to find, right? So like, and then all like I just talked about all the social hurdles of trying to maybe you don't even want counseling, right? Most people don't even want counseling. So
Right.
the cool thing is that martial arts gives you this extra layer of tools to help you with your mental health that doesn't come at you with mental health as the forefront, but you have all these mental health benefits from it. So like that's what I think is so cool about how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gives you all the things I just talked about scientifically in the beginning of this podcast about the oxytocin, all that stuff, and how martial arts in general can give you all these mental health benefits. And we see all these articles. And right now, BJJ, I chose BJJ, if you noticed, as a marketing thing because that's what everyone's talking about nowadays is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So like you'll see a lot of articles. You type up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mental health. A lot of anecdotes from famous actors to moms. I've seen I don't know how many TikTok videos of someone who lost a child and went to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu after a family member just died, and they didn't go into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for mental health. They just went in to let out some of that aggression, those emotions that come up from such a powerful experience outside of a dojo, and how having a place to let that out really helped them. And then later they did get counseling. On top of that, they did get counseling, right? And then they're talking to their counselor about how it helped them. So like they kind of work together is what I want to say. And I think that was the whole point of this podcast for the interview. And any of you coaches are just starting nodding your head, yeah, I went through the same thing. Or maybe you didn't. Go into the comments and talk about if you have a comment about how it's helped you or hasn't helped you. I know me, just in my podcast, I've had martial artists contact me and send me messages whenever I have a podcast like this and be like, yeah, I really appreciate being able to hear something like this. And they share this long experience about how martial arts helped them and how it helped them kick a habit. That's one of the biggest things, how martial arts help.
Oh yeah.
I have like 1,000 anecdotes on that one. Like so many people that have stopped drinking, have gotten off drugs. Just one story after another of people who were able to use martial arts to get sober and fix their life. So because martial arts is really addictive, and it's a positive addiction to have. So like that's one of the things that
There's not a lot of things out there like that,
Yeah.
like it's, I mean, I guess we could argue about striking to an extent, depending on who you're moving around with. But I would argue overall, yeah, it's a positive addiction to have.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, is there any closing statements you want to make, man?
I mean, I think that it would be cool if I just dropped that Survivors of Suicide Lost San Diego does Zoom meetings internationally. So if you have lost someone to suicide, and unfortunately, it's a Saturday night around 7 o'clock sometimes. Most martial arts places are open around 7, so you could always just hit a class. But if you're not feeling up for that, some people can't make it out of bed. You could always start with a meeting and relating to other people if you've lost someone to suicide, and then you can work your way into the gi, into rolling around with some people, or into busting some heads. It's a good starting point. So I would definitely check out soslsd.com or .org. Sorry.
And
That's pretty much it, though.
And those counseling sessions, are they free or?
Yeah, it's free. So it's all
Okay.
peer support, but I mean, you're getting peer support from people who've lost someone to suicide, like sometimes 10, 15 years ago, who've been doing it, every week or every other week. You can definitely get some good advice and some good peer support. And just like the community you get from martial arts, sometimes that's a good starting point for people.
So there you go. So, and that website one more time was?
soslsd.org.
soslsd.org. soslsd.org. Is that right?
That's it.
Okay. Here, I just typed it in real quick for anybody watching. Here we are, soslsd.org. Every Saturday, you said you have every Saturday.
We have meetings. So if you join, there's a regular Zoom meeting, not every Monday, Wednesday, but if you click on the calendar, support group calendar, you can see all the different dates that they have there that you can attend. The support group calendar is a tentative, so you can kind of plan around it, but
Okay.
you would still want to become a member, which is free. You just, put your info in so that you get the weekly email for the, like, hey, for sure, these are the dates this week that you're going to have the meetsts. So I think there is one tonight. Is there? Hey, spouse. Yeah, look at that. And
Yeah.
so if you look,
7 p.m. Yeah.
there you go.
And they also
7
have
o'clock PST.
Yeah. So there you go. If these are Zoom meetings, so no matter where you are in the world, 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, you can check out their calendar. It's free to join. So if you lost a loved one to suicide and you need a place, maybe you're not ready to step in there and start rolling with someone just yet, and you want to talk it out first. Hey, I highly recommend this website. Well, this has been another episode of Social Jello with Angelo podcast about martial arts and sometimes psychology and mental health. One of these episodes once a week. Stay tuned. Catch y'all next time.
Thanks.